And in our opinion, these categories are problematic because we don't see them as very stable. We see them as something that is very perhaps comparable to the Earth itself, which is constantly moving and it's transient in many aspects. And we think art history is also not something very fixed. And these regional narratives, which are now in focus in your program, but which are happening in many areas of the planet, are actually affecting the stability of the categories we have established before. And I think that's very exciting. Perhaps this is not so visible at the moment, but we think that within a certain period of time, as more and more art research is done, historical research is produced in these regions, that they will eventually affect these universal categories that we can assume that exist now. That would be very difficult. Yes, there are many areas that require further research, and since Eastern Europe is a region which consists of many countries, and these countries have national art histories which have, in many cases, still have to be reworked and established, and many national art histories are still in the making, and there are many areas that need to be addressed, and once this is established, one can talk more confidently about something specific of the region. So there are still many areas where this work should be done, from Hungarian example on working of the neo-avant-garde art history to the questions of many.
I mean, also, looking back to socialist realism and so on. There's every single aspect of East European art is still up for interpretation, and another thing that we're quite interested in is the processes by which these histories are being created. So the role of different players, of museums, local museums, also international museums like MoMA and Tate, and the role of other art players in moulding and revising these narratives of the art history of the period.
The whole period, and especially the period around 1968, was a very productive period, and many practices that were responses to local conditions, but in a way that were speaking in a global language from the beginning, were very unique and very expressive, and really worth looking into as examples which are worth considering, and where is so much originality in their practices. So I would single out this neo-avant-garde practices of Eastern European artists, which worked in very specific conditions, which dearly influenced their mode of working, but which came as something very strong and expressive in that sense.
And maybe the conditions of nonconformity also were a driver to a more original approach, maybe in some cases of some artists.
And if we're going to talk about Hungary, but every country of Eastern Europe has their own amazing originals, and Hungary is no excuse, and no exception.
Yeah.
And Hungary also has very strong individual artists with unequally perhaps addressed legacies, but some artists have stronger importance in terms of further careers or the careers of younger artists, and some have been perhaps more integrated into international art currents. But there are definitely artists such as Tomasz Szentjoby or Dora Mauer, as we know, and many others which have developed very specific practices. And in the younger generation of artists, if we think about contemporary art, the situation is very similar. And Tamás Kásás is one of the artists which we can really look in for answers about many contemporary questions that artists as well as art world has to address.
when we see these two terms, international and global, we sort of unavoidably can't help thinking about the planetary, which of course would be taking things one step further in terms of relating not just to a globe conceived in very human terms, sort of about the anthropogenic globe, but thinking more about the planet and how artists relate to concepts such as nature and the planet as a whole, rather than just particular national or even international art trends.
I think it's definitely relevant to talk about the global, because it is responding more to the contemporary situations and the moment in which we're working. And this global art history, one moment of particular resonance is 1968 and the dematerialized art practice which happened across the globe. And I think it's really important, the job or the work you're doing at MoMA, of really addressing these practices across the planet, and this is I think an appropriate way to do it, rather than thinking in international terms, which would perhaps only focus on exchanges which happen across various borders and nations and among the artists, but really looking at the practices which originated in particular regions and how they are similar or different to other practices across the region. So I think this is a useful way to really address the art history at the moment. Working in a large institution such as this one does provide opportunity to take more global perspective on art history, while I'm doubtful whether it can be done within one person. I think that dealing with one region in particular, allows you to go deeper and understand all the related issues and specificities of particular region, and this kind of gets lost if you try, take the totally global perspective and just stay on the surface. I think it's rather a big challenge to have like a truly global art history done through a figure of one art historian, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I am very skeptical of these overviews, which are like single-authored overviews of the global art history, which I think inevitably leads to some omissions and some superficialities. And I think that it really is
teamwork.
It's on one hand, it's the teamwork. On the other hand, is like really going deeper into the regional art histories. That is perhaps the answer at the moment. I mean, we don't want to be too flattery, but we think that our MoMA has a quite good approach, and it could be exemplary for other institutions, because we think with this CMAP project it is quite a good method set to get involved in the local art scenes and art practices. We think that this mixture of like research trips and the research that is done by the curators involved, in-house curators, into the art histories of the region is quite remarkable. And actually we believe that in this world of unprecedented acceleration of all aspects of life, including art histories, it's actually doing slow art history is quite a good response.
That's exactly right. And the slow art history, you can think about slow art history, but also archaeology is also a relevant reference point. And if you think about the art, East European art of the 60s and 70s of being quite a fragile reserve or a fragile material, and how, what approaches do we need? And some people, maybe museums who want to move too fast, or especially the art market and galleries, maybe would try to capitalize too quickly on that sensitive material, and that's, in the long term, that's going to do damage to those art histories, and will put new barriers into actually fully understanding the importance of East European art to wider global art history. So maybe it's good if institutions proceed a little bit of the spirit of the careful archaeologist, or to go back to our original metaphor, maybe of the geologist, like going, really looking for trying to understand those complex layers of these different strata of art history and of East European art history.